Hey guys, welcome to another ManOn2nd podcast. I'm joined, as always, by Joe Fasaro and Eric Wiedeke is with us today. And hope both of you guys had a great Thanksgiving. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. But celebration's over, and we're in the hottest time of the winter with the hot stove going on, and a busy last few days for the MLB and the Marlins, especially with the December 2nd doomsday kind of looming around where this CBA is going to expire and a potential lockout is coming. But guys, we have some news for the Marlins. They got Sandy to extend. He signed a 5-year, $56 million contract extension. And this morning, they finalized Azevedo Garcia, 4 years, $53 million. So where does this stand right now, and what do you feel about the first two moves of the Marlins offseason?
Yeah, Mike. Well, first to clarify, the deadline is December 1. So,
Sorry.
and that's that's when the current CBA expires, and we're seeing this flurry of activity, and I'm excited about it, guys, and I know you guys are too. And this is going to be a fired up podcast and a good one because this finally we have action, and what the Marlins did. Especially on the heels of what the Mets did over the weekend with their three big signings. Very big step for the Marlins in fulfillment of, what they've told their fan base and everyone is they planned on being active and they were in add mode rather than be in subtract mode. And in terms of the Avisail Garcia signing, of course we like it because he was a man-on-second target. Remember, guys, when we were talking about him real early, and he was on our realistic Marlin shopping list, and so we like it. And why do we like it? Big time power, and that translates at Lone Depot Park. So really big. The Sandy was, Craig Mish had that a couple of days or before Thanksgiving. Then it finalized. We expected that to happen as well. Obviously, two signs. What is that, guys? $109 million. Basically for two players. And your thoughts, Eric? Because when you're trying to send a signal to your fan base, at least you've done something and you got quality people and you made your roster better, and there's still more to come.
Yeah, no, I think it's that's the most important part is all of these, everything that we've seen coming out, coming off of the heels of Avisail Garcia and Sandy has been, there's more coming. It's not over, because I think maybe, and a lot of people, for example, there were a lot of people that were upset about the Starling Martay thing. Granted, 4 years, 78 is a bit rich for my taste for Martay, if I'm completely honest. But at this, and on the same token, listen, the fact that the Marlins are still in on some of the names that we're hearing about shows maybe an even more optimistic view of how much they're willing to spend. Because if you would have come into this offseason and you would have told me, oh, the Marlins are going to, maybe approach $200 million in free agent signings over the course of the offseason, I would have called you crazy. But if they really are in on some of the names that we're hearing about, like they're still apparently in on Castellanos, that would take them right about to that $200 million mark. That would be, beyond expectations, I think, for most Marlins fans.
And Joe, why don't we give everyone a background on Garcia I know there might be a little bit casual Marlins fans, casual MLB fans out there that may not know exactly how good he is because, he was on Milwaukee last year, had a great year. But how do you feel like he fits into this team? Where would he slide in? With, the Marlins have some outfielder. They need to upgrade maybe two spots, and now they got one. So where do you think he fits in?
Yeah, he's been a right fielder, real plus arm, very strong arm. Kind of raises what are they going to do with Jesus Sanchez? Does he go to left, or if they're in on Castellanos, is there, it gives you also the fallback if Sanchi, who had a very promising rookie year, is completely not ready for the steps of becoming a contender, allows you the depth to carry him as either your fourth outfielder or DH if there's the DH. It gives you flexibility. But Garcia, what we like, Mike, we kind of touched on it, is a lot of the qualities we liked about Adam Duvall were the big power, the right-handed power, which to offset some of the lefty power the Marlins have, and a guy that, we saw him when he was with the Rays a few years back, hit a home run against the Marlins at the park there that was in Stanton country in the middle of, dead center. I think Christina DiNicolo in her story mentioned something about like the max exit velo of like 116. And this is where I pay attention to StatCast, is when you're in a very high percentile of how hard you impact the baseball. And what I like about him in a lot of ways too, and difference than Adam Duvall, the K rate was about 23%, and it really has kind of been there his whole career. And we've talked about this on the show. The Marlins, I believe, were second in total strikeouts in baseball last year, while finishing like basically second to last in power, meaning in either home runs or slugging. You can't be both. I know the Rays were like third in strikeouts, but yeah, the Rays also like led the majors or right up there in runs scored and in power numbers. So there was a trade-off there. Yes, they swung and missed, but they also did serious damage. The Marlins, for as big as Lone Depot Park is, if you're a power hitter who's hitting the ball over 110 miles an hour regularly and you're putting the ball in play, you are a much more effective player because of just the amount of ground that has to be covered, that your BABIP probably all goes up in a lot of good numbers there. So big in on this signing. And those are reasons why, when I was putting together my realistic signings for the Marlins, I did that more of me playing GM more than me being the insider. Because frankly, I wasn't around the team as much. I'm retired and now I'm trying to be entrepreneurial. I'm not going to be in the weeds, and hopefully we're going to get someone here at ManOn2nd at some point in 5 reasons that will get people more in the weeds, and I could do a little more analytical stuff, meaning analyzing and being an analyst. And I'm happy to see they're kind of following my blueprint, and we're still in on Castellanos from all indications, and I'm loving that. And your thoughts on where they go from there?
Okay, so let's just get right into that. We got to figure out what's next. We have heard rumors that Castellanos still under interest, but we've also had a report come out today that he's looking for about 7 years. Do the Marlins reach that 7-year mark if that's actually what he's looking for, or is that more maybe just some agent talk going on?
Let me take it, Eric. I think that, first of all, yes, a Scott Boras client, it's not unusual. He's 29, he'll be 30 when the season starts. We'll be looking for that 7-8 year deal. Doesn't mean you can't do a 6-year deal with options for a 7th or ever. Doesn't mean there can't be an out. There's all sorts of ways to be in there. And yes, people, they get all hysterical. Oh my gosh, they can't sign a guy for 7 years. Well, you just signed Garcia, who is what? I think Avicel, is he 31 or so?
Yeah.
Something like that.
31.
You signed him for 4 years. You get Castellanos entering his prime. We don't know what the CBA is going to look like when we come out on the other end, and we will come out at some point. They will be a 2022 baseball season, and we don't know what the economics will look like. And all I know is the Marlins need impact, and that's what I've been looking for. Impact middle 3-4 hitters, 3-4-5 hitters that can scare the other team, and have their game translate to Lone Depot Park. And Castellanos, to me, fits that, and he's probably going to be a $100 million plus player, like Eric was noting, which would push the total spendings over $200 million, and then you could look to make maybe some trades to address catcher or handle however you want it there. But yeah, I think it should be realistic. Whether it is, I don't know, but we'll see.
And Eric, we woke up to a flurry of tweets from John Heyman today, where the Marlins were connected with guys, such as Castellanos, Eddie Rosario, Chris Taylor, and even Kyle Schwarber, which that one doesn't really make sense to me. But according to Heyman, they're connected to some of these guys. As we talk about what's next, what are some of those guys that you see as a potential fit for the Marlins?
Obviously, when you look at what the Marlins currently have on the roster and you look at what they need, I think the most obvious in terms of fit overall would be Chris Taylor, because you slot him right into center field, boom, that's outfield complete. Castellanos does fit at a corner outfield spot. Of course, if you are projecting Sanchez to be one of your guys in the corner outfield spots, then it gets a little, But that said, I think Taylor, if money is no object, he makes the most sense in terms of where you would slot him in. He gives you a decent power speed combo plus defender in the outfield, especially at a big park like Lone Depot. That's really important. I think though when it comes down to the messaging from the front office, and they're going to test this theory out, I think it's get the bats and worry about literally everything else later. So, even the Schwarber thing, if they get Schwarber, then that's basically an indication that we know it's likely the DH is coming to the NL, but if they get Schwarber, then that's like a confirmation, at least in my mind, that the DH is coming 100%, because you can't have him defensively.
Angel, let me ask you this. So none of these guys can play catcher or play catcher. I know Schwarber did at one point, but none of these guys play catcher. And they need a catcher. So where does this fit in? Where does the catcher fit in the equation? Is this going to come via trade? If you get Castellanos, do you maybe move him to third base and then maybe parlay Anderson into upgrading at catcher? Where does the catcher fit in? Because that's probably their second most important position that they need right now. Maybe one.
I look at catcher, and I agree with Eric in the fact that get the bats, figure it out. And Chris Taylor also plays infield. He's a player I've loved for many years.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of joked, Chris Taylor started going about 4 or 5 years ago. He was with the Dodgers, and when I was in Dodger Stadium, he single-handedly beat the Marlins 3 straight games, did something and played 8 different positions, it seemed. And I left Dodger Stadium then saying, this guy might be the best player I've seen all year. And so I've always kind of said, Chris Taylor, if I had an MVP vote, he would be on my ballot. And then all of a sudden, Fangraphs, you're looking, he was always in the top 10 in WAR. So we love Chris Taylor. To answer to your question about catcher, I still think you got to, if Gary Sanchez is available, do you go there? There's so much of his game I don't like, but I know that the Yankee connections with Gary Denbo and everybody in the Marlins front office that knows that player, I still, if you get Gary Sanchez, we're talking DH too, right? And this is why I don't think the Marlins will have one DH, which could mean Garrett Cooper's situation could be changing in a few days, because you're going to need, and I like that positional flexibility, but I would look at Gary Sanchez as an 81-game catcher and then, a DH and a pinch hitter and whatnot, and go with Fortes, or you look for a complementary, more a traditional backup catcher guy that probably more than 30 games a year to start, more than just the Sunday day game or your day game starting catcher.
Mm.
I would rather make a trade. I'd rather, I guess you could go with the Jacob Stallings. There's some linkings there. And there are other catchers out there as well on teams that haven't done very well that you probably could make the trade. But I do think if you can get the necessary bats, then you could look for a catcher who could be, more with the glove. And if he hits pretty decently, great, but it's not the biggest need. One thing I do like about this, it clearly seems like they're not in on a Wilson Contreras type of move, because you could, like Eric said, you could move Castellanos around if you got him. Does he play third sometimes? Does he go over to first? You could get him at either corner. You need depth. We know that whatever that open day lineup looks like, you're going to be in your bench pretty soon. But I want to throw another guy out there. This could be an interesting, if the Marlins do not get Castellanos, and it goes a little bit against, get a pure power bat. An interesting player, especially with what the Mets did over the weekend, is where's Javi Baez have a home now? Where is he go? Does he go back to Chicago just to go to Chicago? When you're hearing very little buzz, they seem like they're more tear down than ready to win. The Marlins at least are, feel they have, complementary players, add core players. Do you make a run at a Javi Baez, and then do you put him at second and experiment with Jazz in center field, or Baez at third, or whatever? Because Brian Anderson could be on the bubble too, as a trade candidate. He's entering arbitration, coming off surgery, set to make $4 or $5 million. Those type of I think I'm just throwing it out there. And not that I've heard it, but I think it would be interesting. You talk about if you had Javi Baez as part of the Miami Marlins, I think you're going to sell some merchandise. Just like I thought Castellanos would too. It's just throwing it out there. I think he would be more, and he is a high K rate guy. So I'm kind of contradicting myself in terms of getting that, but he's a very dynamic player in the fact he could steal a bag. He helps you defensively, and he's just one of those guys that brings a lot of energy to your team. And it would be interesting if the Marlins are looking to galvanize the fan base if they didn't get Castellanos, because I can't see him getting both of them. And the other thing with Baez to keep in mind, unlike Castellanos, who carries a qualifying offer, and which will not be a deterrent, which means the Marlins would have to forfeit a pick, but it would not be that number 6 overall, which they have going into the 2022 draft. Javi Baez does not carry a qualifying offer. He wasn't with the Cubs or the Mets the entire season. So he does not carry that. So he would just be whatever his cost is. Now, does he think he's a $200 million player? He may think that, but his market, I don't think, will be that. And especially since I'm not sure Trevor Story is going to get the kind of money he thinks he's going to get. I think that Seager and Correa will get big money, but other than that, I think those other shortstops may not get what they think, which could create interesting situation with here in Miami. If you're in on Schwarber, then why wouldn't you be in on Baez?
Yeah, and I know I've only seen we saw the Mets, we saw Chicago, the Mets kind of eliminated. I saw Boston being linked to him a little bit from MLB trade rumors, or saying Boston was a little bit linked there. But yeah, I think there could be a market. He's a good player to have here. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, no, I mean, when you look at a guy like Baez, number one, I think he would love an opportunity to sign with an NL East team to play the Mets as often as possible. Number two, if I were to put on my manager hat here, I would say that I think third base would probably be the place that I would try to play him. I know that he's got the arm for it, and he's a decent-ish. I would try to make it work at third base. He's not an all-out power guy, but I think he's got enough to play, in Lone Depot, certainly. The only thing that concerns me is what concerns you, Joe, is the high K rate. But I think you're banking on the talent at that point, because if you sign him in a down year, in a down market, you could potentially get yourself a really good upside if he does play, to that top half of his potential.
Eric, keep this in mind too. Miggy could go to third. I know Ken was like, you could, if Baez is not as comfortable there, Miggy could go and play seamless. Now he's not going to give you the traditional third base power numbers, but in your defensive infield could be interesting. You'd be very athletic with Jazz, who I think will get better defensively. I've seen young kids. When you play the middle of the field, you get a lot of opportunities in your first year in the big leagues. Playing on the turf in Miami as well, it speeds it up a little bit. Even though they try to make it as true, everyone says it's true, like real grass. Well, it's still turf. No matter how you slice it, it's still turf. Just really, really athletic. You get across the board there, and I guess it's raising what, and we'll get this later on when we talk about the non-tender guys and meaning the ARB guys. We'll talk about Brian Anderson a little bit more in a bit, but I do like that as kind of a fallback. I don't know if there's conversations, but I think that would be a name, just us, playing GM and having fun. I think, like I said, you guys know where I feel, stand on Castellanos, but if that doesn't happen, if they feel they're too similar to a Garcia type of situation with Castellanos and Garcia, that's more of a thump in the middle of your lineup. This gives you thump in the middle of the lineup with Garcia, and kind of that speed and the dynamic stuff that Baez brings to the game, playing wherever he is on the diamond.
Yeah, and let's go back for a second and talk about the Mets, as they just had a crazy last couple of days. And we knew they were going to be spenders. Once they got Cohen as their owner, we knew they were going to be spenders. And they got a familiar face, someone that we've talked about a ton on this podcast, Starling Martay, which I have my opinions on the whole way the Marlins handled Starling Marte. I don't know if we want to go into that.
Yeah, go on. I have no problem. Yeah.
I just don't get it. I just don't get their process of you had him on your team. You had a chance to extend him at a lower price than what he got in free agency. What, by their numbers, according to what we saw out there, they were probably off by what, $7 million between what Marte wanted and what the Marlins were offering at that time, like $5 to $7 million a year. And then you trade him for a guy that's, as we talked about, me and you were not high on Luzardo. I mean, maybe fifth starter, if at best a fifth starter, which was fine, but at best a fifth starter. And then you go into a spending competition for him a few months later in the offseason. I thought the process was terrible. If you wanted him so bad, just sign him at a way cheaper price that you were going to get him 3 months later. And to me, it doesn't make sense. And it honestly is just a bad look to be like, okay, we don't want you then, but we're also not going to spend that much for you when we say we want you again. Like it just, the whole process. And maybe they weren't in it as much as it was reported here in free agency, but the whole process to me was really silly and just a really bad look for the Marlins.
Eric, you want to follow?
Yeah, I mean, sure, you can, and to an extent, I do agree. I think maybe in terms of the negotiations in season, it's not necessarily the best look. I think if I had to put myself in their shoes, I think what they wanted to do was they wanted to keep the books as free as possible heading into the off season. And knowing that there was a chance that they were going to lose Marte regardless, maybe they wanted to get whatever value they could during the season and then come back to it with, okay, well, our books are free, we're clear, we can do whatever we want in the offseason. I think that's what they would tell you that they were looking at. But overall, it does kind of make yourself look like you're a little lacking in direction.
Yeah, and Eric, I want to follow on what Mike was saying, because the word he used was process. It was a clumsy one, to say the least, because normally if you have interest in signing a upcoming free agent, those talks were going on last year at this time, following the 2020 season. I get it. COVID was going on. We didn't even know if spring training was going to start. They didn't know if there'd be fans in the stands. They probably didn't know where their revenue was going to be. At the time, they didn't have their new TV deal done. They didn't have, the naming rights. They were doing all sorts of stuff last year at this time. But whatever it was, they went into spring training, and we talked about it, Mike and I in the pod, about he was their best position player long before anyone else was. They were talking about extend Brian Anderson. That's what, if you listen to what the fan base was saying in spring training, extend BA, when we were telling everyone, this is your best player, best position player. But they left him vulnerable because they thought they were going to be in it. And I think they thought if they weren't, they could just trade him. Well, he had he missed about a month with injury, but then when he came back, he was amazing. And then it created, well, this guy's a pending free agent. What are we going to do? And then he comes out publicly saying, I want to be here. So next thing you know, they're talking to him. But I was hearing from people in the organization in early July, they were shopping him. Nothing ever really added up. And then, which made me think, and if I'm Marte, why are you signing in July? Why don't you just test the market? So I never really knew. I know what, and I'm saying what was reported is inaccurate. I just think as being a longtime journalist, I know how things work. What I hear and report is what you hear, what you're told. But what you're told sometimes is what the message they want you to hear. And I don't understand why he wouldn't have wanted to test his market, because he could always come back if that was the case. But if it was, like Mike said, if he was off, if he really wanted to be here, and the Marlins offered 70, let's say, and the Mets offered 78, well, you could be in Florida full time, the state income tax, all that other stuff. Is that really a deal breaker? So really, was the offer 70? What was the serious? And the message, obviously, the team wants it out that they're aggressive, because they want to look good in the eyes of. But nothing ever added up. So I'll take it for what it's worth. I'm just throwing it out there that I'm not sure everything was exactly, he wants to be here, and we want to, I think I saw someone in the comments said, we're offering, 40 cents on the, we wanted him, but we were going to always be 40% less than what the final bid was. So it was strange. It created a lot of, back and forth. And I think the Marlins recovered nicely, to get Garcia, signed Sandy to kind of put that at bay. But I will say this, because, and I'm with Eric as well, I like Marte, but not at the price, and not nearly at that price. But I think in New York, he's going to be very effective, because look what he does to that lineup. He's been more of, we talk about 5-tool player, but I want to see 5-tool player, the numbers across the board say 5-tool player. And when he's not hitting homers or driving guys in and has to hit leadoff, and he's 33, stealing 40 bags, I mean, how sustainable is that? But if he goes up there in 2022 and he gets on base and steals second, well, he's got Lindor and Alonso and, McNeil and those guys behind him that are going to drive him in. Escobar, Canna, so he's in a good spot. I think he's in a spot where he's going to have a good year, and Marlin fans are going to say, see, what you should have signed him. But his circumstances in New York are going to be a little different than Miami. And I also am not always the biggest fan of just bring guys back. If the mix didn't work, get new guys, and you live with the consequences. And hopefully, for the Marlins' sake, they got Garcia. Hopefully, they get either a Castellanos, a Baez, or someone that maybe even Conforto. If they don't get either, the thing is, Conforto is going to cost you a qualifying pick, but he could play some center as well. So there are other options out there that you just move on and you deal with it.
Yep. And as much as the crazy situation is, he signed 4 years, $78 million with the Mets. It is what it is. And the Mets are having a big offseason. They got Eduardo Escobar. They got Mark Canna, former Marlins farm guy there. But the bigger news is there's rumors, and it seems to be coming towards the finish line, that they're about to offer Max Scherzer what's going to be the highest, what I've read, the highest annual average value contract ever. And it's going to be a little bit north of $40 million over a short-term contract. Sounds crazy money-wise, but they have it. So, Joe, what do you think about the Mets so far? Have they put themselves in position to be the best team in the East?
The Braves aren't done yet either. But the Scherzer makes. How do you not like Max Scherzer on your team? Yeah. And if you could pay $42 million or whatever it's going to be, as long as he's healthy, or you got a bulldog, and if DeGrom is healthy, Scherzer and DeGrom are very formidable, but if healthy is also risky. So if they missed out on Gausman, and Scherzer is incredibly big splash. I'm hoping for it just for the fact of just how fun the podcasts are going to be, and the East is going to be. To just load up the players, bring them all in the NL East, let them all talk, come down here from Florida in spring training, and we'll have a lot of fun with this podcast. But whether the Dodgers let it happen, I'm not so sure, but we'll see. Stephen Cohen has been, very active, and remember, he got mad at Steven Matz, so maybe he's going to get that $44 million, just give it 1 year to Mad Max.
Eric, how do you see this Mets offseason?
It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun because honestly, it's good for baseball that they found themselves at least somebody that wants to be George Steinbrenner. So at least that's just my impression of Stephen Cohen. But man, it's gonna be a lot of fun. At the very least, he's gonna be an executive that he seems like he's going to keep himself in the news cycle a lot. He's probably gonna be one of those guys that's just, it's fun. It brings fire. It brings fire to the NL East. He's love him or hate him, he's a big personality.
And just to quickly touch on this, one option that Marlins fans thought they were going to try to get Byron Buxton sign an extension and with the Twins. Joe, I feel like you never bought in on that talk.
No.
You never thought Buxton was available, and you probably wouldn't have traded for Buxton.
What do you give him for a guy who averages 7 years in the big leagues and averages 70 games a year and $100 million? It's like that. They know the player; he's theirs. I remember seeing Buxton when I was, going up to Jupiter several years back, just covering Marlin pitchers on rehab assignments, and they're playing the Twins prospects from Fort Myers, and people are like, that guy in center field, he's going to be the best player in baseball. And yes, when healthy, the when healthy guys are not how rebuild teams or teams that are trying to win it. What do you do? You're giving up, and I know people get all excited, but that's not one I was ever excited about. And obviously it was something, who even knows how active it was, because I will say this, everyone calls every team about every player. So that probably was as realistic as all the teams that called the Marlins about Sandy Alcantara's availability. And, you just, before everyone was a Twitter GM and had their own Twitter podcast, the beat writers would be kind of more guarded to not try to mislead people and send them on these wild goose chases. But, any call gets all this kinds of excitement, and I never was in on it. And I'm glad for the player, good for him, get his money. And I'm glad for the Marlins that they don't have to make that risky investment.
Another guy that we're very happy for, a ManOn2nd, and happy for the Rays to get their guy locked in. Wander Franco signed 11 years, $182 million extension. There's been a lot of talk about this, whether it was crazy or not. I personally, and I want to know what Eric and Joe think, I personally think it's a great move. I think it's great for the Rays to lock in their guy very early. They covered, 4 or 5 free agent years?
Yep.
Which is going to be a bargain for, assuming Wander Franco is as good as he showed that he was. Covering those free agent years at that price is going to be a bargain. I think this is a great deal for the Rays. I think it's great for the Rays to finally extend someone and show, hey, we're going to spend too. When we have our guy, we have our guy. So personally, I think this is a great move by the Rays. I think they did it at a perfect time. What do you think, Eric?
I think when you have a franchise cornerstone, and you have a conviction on him, like the Rays clearly do, you get out in front of it. Some of the best contracts in baseball right now are deals that were, maybe it's not the same money as what Franco got, but I think if you asked a lot of people right now, what are some of the best contracts in baseball? You look at what Atlanta did with Ozzie Albies a few years back when he was a young player, giving him 7 years, $35 million. Get out in front of it. Don't let these guys hit the market, because when they do, you're going to get into a bidding war with LA and New York, and you don't want to put yourself in that position, especially if you're a small market team like the Rays. You have your guy, get out in front of it, reward him on the front end, sends the right message to him, it sends the right message to Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I love it as well. And, pretty much, and, we saw in at least the last couple of days that the Marlins did something. We were wondering where's their plan, and their plan seems to be have a lot of, they're firing, handing a lot of fires there. You're just trying to get whatever. If we miss out on Castellanos, we're in on Schwarber, and if we miss on him, we're on Chris Taylor. The Rays have a clear plan. They really, what their plan is. They've already made some moves, moved some guys out, moved some guys in, but they knew you got and the word I use is a generational player, because that's the term I heard back when Miguel Cabrera was 20 years old, is a generational player. And, the industry saw it right then and there. When you got a generational player, not everyone is. I know a lot of us think everyone's a generational player if they are player of the week. But this is a legit guy and premium position. And the fact that, he's in their state and he's with a team we really like and are following, and they made that commitment. Now, the Rays have a lot going on, obviously. They're trying to get a stadium in Tampa, St. Pete. They might be Montreal, Tampa Bay at some point. But regardless, they got a player that their fan base could get excited about. They got they remove all that rumor mills. And I wanted to bring this up because, covering all these Marlins through the years, I heard it with Dontrell Willis. I heard it with Miguel Cabrera when they were really young, and certainly with Giancarlo Stanton. Every day, every Sunday, the Boston Globe, the New York Times, or Daily News was writing, Yankees or Red Sox need to trade for Stanton. They need to trade for Stanton. Stanton couldn't do anything in Miami without, if he had a good week, if he had 40 homers, everyone's like, they got to go get Stanton. They got to get Stanton. And you guys are young enough that you grew up with Stanton, and you had to hear that. And as a fan base, I think that's demoralizing. And from the player standpoint, that's a distraction because you're playing wondering. At some point, you're going to start believing it because yes, great players are mentioned in trade talks. That happens all the time. It's part of the game, part of the business. But I think from Franco now, he doesn't have to live with media coming in because I saw it in spring training. All the national writers would come into Miami. They'd all sit at Stanton's, locker with him and basically write all these stories. Do you want to be here? What do you think's going to happen? Oh, it's out of my control. Oh, it's this. And then, then if Stanton didn't talk to the local media, it's like Stanton's grumpy or Stanton's this or what that. The guy had to hear every day. Oh, what do you think? What do you think? They traded this guy. And Franco does not have to hear that. Yes, they could still trade him, but they ain't trading him if they're in contention for winning the division. They might trade him if they look like they're terrible, but they certainly don't look like a terrible team. And if anything, they are gearing up because they got some young starting pitchers that are going to make that franchise a freaking powerhouse for next at least first 5-6 years of this kid's career. And all he has to do is stay healthy and play baseball. He got himself financial security, and he's still going to be young enough that he can make more money if he holds up on the back end when he finally reaches the end of this one.
Yeah, he's gonna be 31 in free agency when he hits free agency.
Yeah.
Like it's
pretty
nuts.
much. If you're 20 years old in the big leagues making impact, and we were lucky in Miami. We saw Jose Fernandez do it. We saw Giancarlo Stanton do it. We saw Miguel Cabrera do it. Chances are you're going to be a really good player, and and we see Bryce Harper was 19. How old was Trout? 20, 21 maybe.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah,
Juan Soto.
Yes, Soto, absolutely. These guys are, and the Nationals are. Every time one of these things happen, it makes you wonder more and more. When they're the Nationals, they're going to be a little bit in what the Marlins were with Stanton. Is they're going to be hearing that they're either going to have to sign him, and he's going to have to say, well, how close are we? And before we segue into the last thing, guys, I wanted to mention about Castellanos, and this is someone, I think it was leaked. I don't want to say if it was Heyman. If not, I want to give proper credit. But they're talking. I think it was Morosi maybe that Castellanos, the Phillies had strong interest. And that's another thing to keep in mind.
I think it was
Heyman. That you have. You have a guy who Dave Dombrowski was his GM with Castellanos over in Detroit. And you hook Castellanos up there with Harper, Real Muto, and the rest of that gang in Philly playing at Citizens Bank. You gotta look at it that way too. If you're the Marlins, you want to face that, because now you got the Mets lineup to navigate, and you got the Phillies lineup to navigate. We know the Braves are going to be strong. It's the division's going to get certainly a lot stronger, and I would try to avoid that one.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I think me and you and Eric too, we just really want Castellanos because this is something that we've been following on this pod since April 2020. But, there's still some decisions the Marlins also have to make with guys that are coming up to be tendered, non-tendered, and they're in arbitration. The three guys that probably are in danger of might being non-tendered would be Alfaro, Brinson, and a little bit Cooper, and maybe John Birdie too, are the guys that could be non-tendered. Where do you think any of those guys get it? Do you think any of these guys have trade value? Because more likely than not, Alfaro and Brinson probably won't be on the 2022 Marlins, and Cooper might be, depending on on how they want to play him out. He's more of like a chess piece than the other two.
Yeah, I think Jeff Brigham. He's another guy. Sierra, they've already cut loose. Birdie would be interesting, obviously. I'm just reading the list here. And I think Alfaro could be traded, by tomorrow. I don't think they're going to – I don't think they can tender. If they tendered him, then they kind of lock themselves into it's going to be hard to trade him. I think he could either be non-tendered or traded. I think Brinson probably the same thing. Cooper could be vulnerable if they, bring in, because you could put, I think it's according to trade rumors, he's estimated, projected to make like $3 million, which may not seem like much, but if we if you look at it this way, Alfaro's he's expected to make the 2.7 million, and that's 5.7 million, which could go to a Castellanos, a Javi Baez, or whoever else you want to bring in contracts. I think Brinson could be gone because I don't see he's out of options, and being in ARB, they can't really justify 1.3 to him. John Birdie missed so much time with injury. We love John Birdie, but I think that his days are probably numbered. I think those are the guys that can go. But Alfaro is going to be the one I'm probably going to keep the closest eye on, just because I think he's the one who most realistically could be in some sort of trade. You're not going to probably get much, but just some sort of deal, unless they want to do something bigger. Attach, if you want to clear a 40-man space and attach a Cooper and Alfaro and move them somewhere. I'm just talking, but you probably want to keep Cooper as a fallback if you miss on some of these free agent bats and trade bats that you may not get. You probably want to keep him around just in case you go that route.
Yeah, and Eric, if you want to follow up on that.
I was just gonna say, I mean, so much of what they decide to do, I guess, depends on, if there are more moves that follow today. Because if they get themselves another outfield bat, then does it make a lot of sense to? It certainly doesn't make a lot of sense to keep Brinson around. And then Cooper is a guy who probably has a little bit more value than Alfaro. I know Alfaro plays a premium position, but Cooper gives you a little bit more production that you can kind of dangle in front of teams. And like Joe said, I think the Alfaro experiment is just kind of done one way or another. They'll probably deal him for a player to be named later, cash consideration, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
and
Joe,
keep in mind, guys, just for clarity, you can tender them. That doesn't mean you have to necessarily keep them. Tendering just means you're making a commitment to have a 2022 contract with the salary figure to be determined at a later date, and that tendered player still can be carried. You non-tender to get them off your 40-man, so just keep those type of things in mind as well. So I think that you could tender Cooper and still trade him if the rest of your offseason, assuming if there is not a lockout and
right.
or if there is one and it's short, no business can be conducted after Wednesday's deadline if no agreement's in place and a lockout does follow. So it's going to be a fascinating and intense next 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, I just wanted to say maybe if you want to give a quick little, because I'm sure you've experienced this before with the last one, give a little background on what these next 48 hours and potentially what we assume is going to be at least a short labor stoppage, what this is going to look like for free agency, for everything.
I mean,
for those that don't know.
Yeah, the collective bargaining agreement expires whatever the time is on the 1st, which is Wednesday, and if there's no agreement in place, it's widely believed the owners will then lock out the players, which will cease all baseball business talk. So that's why you're seeing this scramble, and then the sides will negotiate. I'm holding hope, and I'm probably the only one, because everyone that in the industry is telling me it's going to happen, and they'll probably be right. But I'm holding out hope because until it's still, no matter how you look at it, it's a bad look. But there are issues that, especially from the Player Association side, that they'd like to fundamentally change. A lot of the specifics they're discussing, I have not seen it being reported. Some of it appears to be to get players younger into making more money, because what's happening now, and we're seeing it, these good young players, you're getting them at good value and then moving them when they make money, and it's guys are hitting free agency oftentimes, like Castellanos at 29.5 and be 30. He's hitting free agency. So these are issues that are going to be determining the future of the sport. It's business at the end of the day, and it's the ugly side sometimes. Let's hope that sanity prevails, and if there is a work stoppage, it's short. I don't think it'll impact spring training, but that's 2 months of no baseball, which we will keep doing our thing on ManOn2nd. We're going to get good guests and hopefully a big one we're going to have at some point, maybe this week, hopefully. And otherwise, we'll talk about amateur players. We'll get college guys on and keep it going there, but we're going to keep going. And hopefully that those who get paid a lot of money to figure these things out do it without damaging the game. But quickly, would you guys, for some of this stuff may be mentioned in this agreement because they want the game to be entertaining, would you be for no shifts? Would you be for a pitch clock? Just some of your quick thoughts before we wrap this up.
Pitch clock, yes. Banning shift, no. I think part of sports is being strategic, right? And it's coaching it's watching film, coaching where to, put your guys to give yourself the best chance to win. I don't see how the shift is different than like playing a different defense in football or going to zone when man's not working in basketball. I don't see the problem with the shift, and it's on the coaches to coach the players to adjust to the shift. That's always been my opinion on the shift. I think the shift is great and it should always stay.
I mean, I'm kind of for it a little bit. I think maybe there are some tweaks that you might be able to make to the shift. Kind of, how far are you going? Do you really want the third baseman playing, 30 feet into right field? Maybe not. I think you can kind of, you can only have, for example, 3 guys in the outfield at one time. I think that might be a rule that you can put in place to kind of eliminate that.
So just back up onto the ground.
Exactly. Then
But but what about when you bring in a 4th outfielder in extra innings to prevent, the walk-off? Like, where do you, baseball? There was never been position. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's never been strict. The shortstop has to be at shortstop. That's never been the case since the existence of baseball. So I don't see why we're gonna punish fielders who some guys make money from being great defensive players and knowing how to play in certain positions in the shift. Why do we punish the players when those type of players when all it is just teach the hitters to adjust to the shift?
Right.
I know it's not that simple.
No, I get that. I get that. Personally, I think we're coming up on the time when the mound is we're gonna have to do something about it. Because it's just really hard to put the ball on the bat with the spike in velocity that we've seen, really unprecedented in the last 10 to 15 years. So that's my thing with the game, but that's for another time.
What about you, Joe?
Yeah, and I'm kind of with Mike because there are unintended consequences. It's easy to say, okay, so you just automatically lose the game. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, okay, we need to move the mound back, let's say, because we've got the pitchers are too good, and then we gotta, you can't defensively, give yourself the best chance because a fly ball, if the guy can tag up, you're basically conceding a game, because you can't use strategy to kind of prevent it. Yes, the odds are against you anyway to stop that. I don't like it. I like the strategy part of it, and with Mike, if you need to get a base hit, I think we saw in the playoffs where teams would normally, when you shifted, you're getting beat by it because the guy that I need to get a hit now. It's not 162. I don't need to get that back, get on base. I'll just punch it to the left side because there's nobody there. And secondly, I want to talk briefly about the pitch clock because I don't think they'd do this in the big leagues, but I was at the fall league, as you guys know, and they had the pitch clock. And I'm videoing Casas. I was only there a few days and needing only, getting X amount of at-bats to see Tristan Casas is one of my main guys I wanted to see. And 2 pitches in the at-bat were called balls because the pitcher didn't pitch, and he walked on 3 pitches. Actually thrown pitches. He was like an automatic ball because that was like a punishment, and I was like, this is the stupidest thing I ever saw. Another guy had a strikeout because the hitter didn't get back in the box fast enough. Next thing you know, he had 2 strikes on him in the next pitch without even swinging the bat or taking a strike. Next pitch, he strikes out. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, and the fall league is a developmental league. So if I'm the Marlins or the Red Sox or whatever, yes, I get that we're doing this, but I want my hitters to develop. And how are you going to develop in a 1-2 count when all of a sudden you're out because your foot was out of the batter's box by an arbitrary, number? I don't think they'd do that in the big league, but imagine if they did. What's going to be the consequences? Is it going to be the playoffs, the Game 7, and you're on there and there's a pitch clock and you're looking at the catcher, you're trying to get the sign, you want to make the perfect pitch to their best hitter, and you took too long and it's ball 4 and the World Series ends? It's going to be quite the highlight reel,
Yeah, I've never like fully got how they would like determine punishments on these type of things, and I've always made it feel like that there's just no way to fix these issues because it's just going to cause a different problem.
Yeah. So, but again, we're trying to get the game better, and you do have to kind of make adjustments and be fluid. But I think you have to really, really think those things through. Yes, we want the game more entertaining, but I'll bring it too. Even moving the mound back, so many pitchers. Look at walk rate. Pitchers have so much trouble throwing strikes. What's that breaking ball going to look like? What's that changeup going to look like? What's Pablo's changeup going to look like if he's throwing it at 63 feet?
You could also make the argument that a lot of the walk rate stuff is because guys are constantly trying to throw 100.
Correct.
I think maybe it encourages guys to, quote unquote, learn how to pitch a little bit more. Yeah. And granted, 63 would be, pretty dramatic.
Well, I'm saying whatever.
I know. But yeah.
Yeah.
I get overall.
I just think that you got to be careful. You got to be careful what you wish for, and just let the game and let it evolve without legislating. It's just like you don't want to overrule. You don't put too many rules, not overrule. You don't want to just make rules up just to make everyone happy, because you end up, really making it very complicated. So I hope they can figure it out, because I think the playoffs were good, and I think people get more excited with just seeing. Yes, I know a lot of the purists, a lot of media types, a lot of old grumpy sports writers. They don't like anything that's different than back in the day, but I do have a problem getting a little too cutesy on. Because it seems like they want to weed out analytics. And then if you're weeding out analytics, you're basically making the sport what it was in the 90s and before. The rich teams, the ones with the resources, are going to. If the Rays can't compete because they're smarter than you and tactically beat you, then you have to spend like the Yankees did and then just win on talent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what language comes into this new CBA. But as we mentioned, we won't be locking out. We'll have our pods next week, maybe another one this week, fingers crossed, and maybe more than that later. But we'll be back next week. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, we hope you had a great holiday, and thank you guys for